Today on Locked On Canadiens, as the home and home series moves to Montreal and the season series between the Habs and Panthers comes to a close, Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers joins us to talk about what these teams have in front of them the rest of the way.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to this crossover episode of Locked On Canadiens and Locked On Panthers. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as that Maybe It's Ian. I'm joined by Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. What time is it really, Armando? It's time for us to talk. We're sort of the intermission between the two games of this home and home series. It was very well timed between getting to do this show together. Your thoughts after game one? How are you feeling after watching that game? On Sunday afternoon. Afternoon games are always so weird to me. How did you feel watching that game? Watching the Panthers on Sunday?
Yeah, I felt like that the Montreal Canadiens had just more of that jump to them when it came to the game. I mean, it's crazy because you think of the whole season series between these two teams. I mean, it's just been losses in three different ways for the Panthers here. The first game was more about the rush chances against. The second game was turnovers in their D zone, and then for this one, even though they got a power play goal in the last one to start the game in Montreal on the 15th, and then this one it was just the fact that the Panthers couldn't stay out of the box, high sticking penalties, and then just being a little slower to their pucks in their D zone, even though they weren't knocking pizzas out of their end. But it's just crazy. And now there's like this added fireworks now with what happened at the end of the game. I know there was 1 second left, but it's the code of when you're down, you're not don't fire a slap shot across the ice when it comes to that. And it manifested with Nico Mikkola getting a $5,000 fine. Maybe if they didn't have any discipline, maybe that would have something happened at the opening puck drop of Tuesday's game. But it's crazy how the tables have turned from going back to the last game of the season series last year. Now it's 4 games in a row that the Panthers have lost to the Habs. Crazy to think.
Yeah, it's funny. I had Scott Matla from Habs Eyes on the Prize and formerly of Locked On Canadiens on our last episode. And we were sort of talking about how it's funny this year, the Panthers have sort of become, on 2 separate occasions, the Canadiens get-right game. The last time they played each other back in mid-March a few weeks ago, the Canadiens were coming back from a West Coast trip where they took 3 out of 4 against Vancouver and Seattle, but they blew leads in both of them, and we kind of left with like a bad taste in everyone's mouth. It was like, they only left 1 point on the board, but it was sort of, man, they should have had more from this. They kept blowing it, and then they come home against the Panthers at the Bell Center. I think it was March 15th, and they just play a really, really great game. I think that was the one where the Panthers had a really tough time with turnovers, uncharacteristically so. Like that's not something that you would expect a Paul Maurice team to be doing. It was odd to see. And I think one of the goals was directly off like an Alex Barkov turnover, which just, if you get a takeaway from Alex Barkov, you better keep the puck. Like you're not getting that often against that player. And I think you're right. I think there's a lot more spice in between these two teams, and it didn't need the Nico Mikkola slap shot at the end of the game. But I can't help but feel that something is going to go down on Tuesday. It just sort of feels like, if he was suspended, which he shouldn't have been. That's such a silly, I think the fine is okay for what it was. Suspending him seems a bit too much, quite honestly. If he had connected with that shot, maybe, but he didn't. So, we all move on. But I think there's a chance that maybe we see Arber Xhekaj draw back into the lineup, and the shenaniganery continues from there. He was out of the lineup on Sunday's game, which was kind of surprising. And, if he was, looking at the pairing that was on the ice at the end of the game, it was Savard, and I don't remember, it might have been Struble next to him. That's usually Xhekaj's spot. So Xhekaj would have been on the ice for that incident, which is kind of scary to think about. So it's interesting to see what may happen on Tuesday. Let's talk about how the Panthers might want to rebound in that game? What do you think they need to improve on from the first half of this home and home? And is it, are there signs across their season that maybe there's a certain way to beat this team?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to puck management for them. I mean, one thing that was great about their game on Sunday afternoon is the fact that they still had a lot of time in their offensive zone. I mean, 5-on-5 of the Corsi was 66-40 for the Panthers, so they gave themselves chances to win. The top line was got the pucks deep, and we're getting in on the forecheck. I mean, we need the Panthers need the middle six guys to really truly show up there. I mean, sometimes you'll see the Anton Lundell at Toulouse-Lorraine line go like 5 games without scoring a goal, and then they'll get maybe 1 or 2 in one. So that's another thing for the Panthers, and really the rush chances against for the Panthers, which Montreal is young, they're energetic, have a lot of speed. For them, so they are really a team that's really riding on a little bit of a high for especially because their coach sells so much of that underdog mentality based on Marty St. Louis' career. I mean, with everything from being a Stanley Cup champion to scoring on Mother's Day as well after the death of his mother. So I mean, that carried on to this young team, and to think that with Montreal, just everyone's on the same page for them. And honestly, to think and to look at the wild card, Ian, it's crazy how many of these teams in their last 10 are just, none of them have 5 wins in their last 10. And to think that even Montreal in the last week, they run into a hot St. Louis Blues team. Yes. Philadelphia, their first game after firing a coach, and then Carolina, although this might be a gap year for them, they're still expected to be at the top of towards the top of the Eastern Conference. But for this matchup, now because it's fresh, it makes the Panthers, the alarms are on for them, knowing that it's a team that they haven't been able to beat. They know that they have to get up and know for them, hey, usually they don't go on long losing streaks. I mean, there was a while where they went without losing 2 straight in regulation. They went almost 2 months at one point. Wow. And now there's a threat that there could be multiple in the same month. I mean, it happened where they almost went 2 years without losing a game in regulation after leading through 40 minutes. They went 2 years without that happening. And then it's happened 4 times since January. So it's really about trying to get back to just what made them successful. And obviously they lost a lot of pieces in the offseason. Brandon Montour now replaced by Seth Jones in the trade deadline. And honestly, their blue line is still a little thin right now with Dmitry Kulikov. Dmitry Kulikov still out of the lineup, Matthew Tkachuk there. So it's really about still the bottom guys also getting into the action. I mean, I know Seth Jones, for him at 5-on-5, he's being outscored 8-4, but he's asking to play a lot when he wasn't supposed to be playing a lot. But obviously the Aaron Ekblad suspensions change a lot of things. So it's still an adjustment period for someone like him. But I didn't think he necessarily himself had a bad game against the Habs. That one goal did deflect off his skate. Didn't think he was in the worst of positions, but just an unfortunate bounce for him. So it's really,
I mean, he got it back. He scored in that game on a puck that, Panthers fans might not know this about Sam Montembeault, who obviously drafted from Florida, played for Florida, was waived by the Panthers and came to Montreal. He's drawn a little bit of a reputation around Montreal for being a really great goalie up close when, the shots are of high danger, but then he'll let in that stinker. Like the Jones goal, he saw the whole way in. The puck never left the ice. I think Money Puck gave it a 2.1% chance of being a goal, and it goes right through his legs. You can see Montembeault is tracking it. He's watching it go right through his legs, and that's sort of what we come to expect from Montembeault. But Jones, to your point, I completely agree. I think he's put in a really difficult spot and is handling it really well. Not only to come in and play for a new team that just is eons better than the team he was on in Chicago. They might as well be in different leagues. And to not only come in and do that, but you're replacing a top pairing defenseman in Aaron Ekblad while also learning a new system, while also working under new expectations for what your play can be. So I think he's been great for the Panthers. And you mentioned Brandon Montour earlier. I will promise you that Montreal Canadiens fans do not miss Brandon Montour one bit. This year, in 2 games with Seattle against the Montreal Canadiens, he had 5 goals. He had a hat trick, and then the second game he had 2, including the overtime winner, which was the fastest overtime winner in NHL history. So we are done with Brandon Montour. We do not
a natural hat trick too.
Yes, yeah, it was a natural hat trick. It was unbelievable. Yep. That was like an 8-2. When Montreal was just getting blown out every night back in like October, early November, before they started to hit their stride headed into the holidays, and go from there. So, all right, let's pause here for a second. We're going to step aside. When we come back, I kind of want to talk about the Panthers getting healthy and seeing the build of their team and maybe some of the reinforcements that are headed Montreal's way. And we'll get into all that in just a minute. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track of your spending. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. I started using Monarch to get a better grasp on my spending. And when I started using it, I realized how much I was spending specifically on food delivery. I'm sure many of us can relate to that sort of charge constantly being on your accounts. It's a lot. And now I budget smarter and I save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, from credit card apps to banking apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, we are back. Locked On Canadiens, Locked On Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Crossover episode with Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers and myself, Ian Boisvert of Locked On Canadiens. Let's talk about the Panthers getting healthy because, look, we all watched the Four Nations. We watched what happened to Matthew Tkachuk, and while it was important at that moment that that U.S. was losing that player, in the back of everyone's mind, we're also thinking this is a guy who could win a back-to-back Stanley Cups. The Panthers are going to be missing this guy. How have they kind of weathered the storm without him? And where are we at with an update on his health? Is there anything new in the hopper there?
Well, regarding his health, he actually started skating for the first time since the injury, which first happened in Montreal, which that was the game on February 15th.
Yeah.
It's like, never forget where you were on February 15th, 2025, when it started off with the 3 fights in 9 seconds.
Man,
for that, it was just
so good,
putting the hockey world on display there. But I even said it at the time that the Panthers owe Matthew Tkachuk an opportunity for him to play at the Four Nations, even through the injury. And I said, even if he played in the final, he was going to miss some time after, even if he did make that game through for him. But as far as like how the Panthers have managed, they've only lost 2 home games since the injury to Matthew Tkachuk. But they recently went on a 6-game road trip where they blew 2 third-period leads, which is one of the 4 third-period leads that I spoke about. The 2 of the 4 in the last 2 months, and that happened in that 6-game road trip, 1 in Boston and 1 in New York. For them, but it's just really just been the focus for them that has just been tough to get through. And obviously Brad Marchand's getting back into the mix after being week to week for him, so he's trying to also get acclimated. 11 games is not necessarily a lot to get used to it, but with an experience of 1,000 games like Brad Marchand, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal when it comes to how he's fitting. So very excited to see what a possible rat line of Matthew Tkachuk, Brad Marchand, and Sam Bennett is going to look like, which that begs the question, what's going to happen to Mackie Samoskevich, who's in his first full season with the Florida Panthers. Now we've seen a bunch of upside with him in the top 6. Who does he knock out if he does stay in the top 6, if he goes up to the Barkov line, or does he go with someone like Anton Lundell on that third line? And there's good problems to have when it comes to that. And Dmitry Kulikov is expected to return before the regular season ends. They're both going to be traveling on this trip, but neither of them are going to play. The Panthers don't have the cap space to bring Matthew Tkachuk back up until the playoffs. And Dmitry Kulikov, he hasn't even skated yet. So the thing is that both are going to be around the team. That's the great part about this, what the Panthers are getting here. And thankfully for the Panthers, we won't have to nitpick things from their third pair defense in Uvis Belinskis and Tobias Bjornfoot, because it's just been a little tough to watch, where Bjornfoot's a little undersized and he does get beat with the net front battles in front of their end. And Uvis Belinskis, I like him as a skater, but sometimes there's those questionable breakout passes that ends up in rush chances for the opposition. So, but the fact is, Aaron Ekblad's not going to be back until Game 3 at the earliest for the Panthers. So they're going to have to manage things even when they do get to Game 1 of the postseason.
Yeah, that was one of the largest shocks of the hockey season was seeing Aaron Ekblad's suspension being announced. But look, I mean, the thing with the Panthers is they just have a ton of depth, right? At every position, they're as deep, if not deeper, than anybody else in the league. And I'm looking at Tuesday's matchup against Montreal, an opportunity for the Canadiens to potentially sweep the season series against the Florida Panthers. And I can't help but feel that we are on a trajectory for the first, characteristic Brad Marchand moment as a Florida Panther. I feel like we are on a collision course for one of the funniest games that he could ever have, which is just reminding everybody how much this team, the Montreal Canadiens, hate that man. And I feel like if he's going to have a coming out party, it's going to be on Tuesday. I know Habs fans are yelling at me right now in their cars or at their desks, telling me to stop speaking this into existence. But we have, as Habs fans, we know we cannot, stop Brad Marchand. We can only hope to contain him for a certain amount of time. They did for a game, but I think just as he gets more under his belt, and I think if the game gets nasty, like we're kind of anticipating, that's kind of where Brad Marchand thrives. He lives in the gray, right? Like I find that's where he's probably going to be at his best. So very curious to see how the Panthers bounce back on Tuesday. I will say for the Canadiens on their end, Jacob Fowler is out of the NCAA tournament as Boston College was eliminated by Denver on Monday night, or Sunday night rather. And
Melbourne, Florida native.
Yes, Florida native. He does have Habs. He has Canadian heritage in him. So I think he changed his Twitter profile picture to him as a little kid wearing a Canadiens jersey. So it seems like it's his time at Boston College is over. And it's just a matter of whether or not he's going to make the jump and sign his entry-level contract in the NHL, burn a year, maybe back up, at some point. It seems unlikely for that to happen. I think what's more likely is he signs an amateur tryout with Laval and then puts off his entry-level contract to start next season, where maybe he can make a run at that, having that role in Montreal. And the other player I wanted to touch on briefly was Oliver Kapanen. Finished up his season over in Timrå. They were eliminated by Frölunda in the playoffs. So he is on his way to Montreal. Back at the trade deadline, they mentioned that he's eligible to play in Laval when he comes back. We're all trying to understand if he's also eligible to play in Montreal, because that's a player that I think the Canadiens could really benefit from having in their lineup, because they don't really seem to trust Joshua Waugh in a top 6 role right now. Michael Bozzetta plays, when he does play, it's 4 minutes a night. Like, he's not a guy that's getting a ton of run. So I'm wondering maybe if there's an opportunity to get a guy like Oliver Kapanen into the lineup for the Canadiens. Not likely this week. It would have to be next week. He has to come back and practice, and they have to make a decision if they want to have him in Montreal or if they want to send him to Laval, who Laval just clinched the playoff spot in the American Hockey League. They're one of, if not the best teams in the American League. Do you just bolster that team even further for a playoff run? So there's a lot of decisions upcoming for the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah.
One last thing before we head to break here. Give me a prediction for Tuesday. What do you think is going to happen when these two teams finish their season series? And it's an important game for both teams, as we'll talk about in our third segment.
Yeah, I do think the Panthers will find a way to win and avoid the sweep for them. I do believe that they will, and I'm interested to see how the line matches are going to be for them. Are they going to match the Suzuki line with Barkov, or are they going to is Martin St. Louis going to go away from the Barkov line and match him with the Sam Bennett line? So that's what I'm interested to see to start off for this one. So that's a matchup that I'm going to be looking forward to, especially knowing that Brad Marchand is going to be on the ice for the Panthers, and Vitek Vanacek is likely going to be the starter for the Panthers because the Panthers will be on a front end of a back-to-back,
Right.
and they will be facing the Leafs on the second end, which is the team they're actually battling with for the top of the division. So they're going to give Vanacek a run here for more than likely for this first game. So I think that the Panthers will find a way to get a dub here.
Yeah, that they're all 4-point games, so to speak, because they're in division, but that the Toronto Florida game is the true 4-point game, right? Because that could determine who wins the division. Quite honestly, it could be what that one team needs. So it makes sense that they're going to go back to Bob in Toronto. And look, Leaf fans, if you're somehow watching this for some reason, I don't know how you stumbled upon this, but Montreal has done you guys a solid. We've beaten Florida a bunch this year. They've gotten no points against us so far. If you guys can't win the division, that's on you. We did our best. Yeah, I think I do think you're right. I think Florida finds a way to avoid being swept in that game. I my only hope is that the Canadiens find a way to steal a point. I think Florida will be coming out trying to win that game from the outset, and it'll be up to the Canadiens to try to weather a storm from a true Stanley Cup contender, which they've done pretty well this year, right? They had that 4-1 comeback against Colorado. They've beaten Florida a bunch. They've played teams, out west really well. So I'm not too worried that they're going to get blown out of the building, but I do think that the Panthers just decide enough is enough. We're gonna get on the board against this team one way or another.
Yeah, and they're 9-8-1 against the Atlantic Division, while their record against the rest of the conference and the West is really great. So hey, more of these games against the Atlantic, the opposition is showing up. And I do have a scenario. If the Panthers win in regulation and the Blue Jackets lose in regulation to Nashville, who Nashville will be on a second end of a back-to-back on Tuesday, the Panthers will officially clinch a playoff spot.
Man, I love these scenarios as we get close to the end of the year. It's always super fun to have more things to watch for. I do want to talk a little bit more about where these teams are headed in their respective chases into the playoffs, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? You can crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's a perfect grab and go snack for busy days, whether I'm driving into the office or I'm at my desk. And I need a quick protein boost. It's a really easy snack to go to. I especially like the different varieties of no shells. I love the sea salt and vinegar, the chili roasted. Those are both really great. And if you love cracking into every shell for that satisfying crunch, don't worry, they haven't forgotten about you. The in-shell options are always a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right. We are back. Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers, myself, Ian Boisvert of Locked On Canadiens. For one last segment here, we kind of want to talk about where these teams are headed, right? I think they're at very different points of their respective, windows, so to speak. The Panthers are very much, they could win the cup this year, next year, the years to follow. That's sort of where that core is right now. They're in a chase for that top seed in the Atlantic Division. I think the top seed in the Eastern Conference is all but locked up by the Washington Capitals, who have stopped playing meaningful games some time ago. They're just kind of hoping to see more Ovechkin goals as the season unfolds, and they're totally happy to do that. But in the Atlantic Division, you have the Panthers, the Lightning, and the Toronto Maple Leafs all arguing for that number 1 overall spot in the division. Who do you think at the end of this comes out with it? Is it the Panthers that end up with that number 1 spot?
All right, so I'm going to provide the audience with strength of schedule.
Yeah, let's do it.
How many back-to-backs these teams have. So the Panthers so Florida has the 14th toughest. Toronto has the 11th toughest, while Tampa Bay has the 10th easiest. Florida has 3 more back-to-backs, which 2 of them are going to come in the next 6 days.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be Vanacek, Bob Vanacek. So I think he would play in Ottawa because they also play Toronto on the Tuesday coming up at home.
Right.
So I think they're going to give the usual Saturday 2 days off rotation back to Tuesday for Sergei Bobrovsky. So I think that's how it's going to go. So 3 back-to-backs for the Panthers, 2 back-to-backs for the Leafs, and 0 for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And now looking at that and seeing the strength of schedule, I think it's going to be Florida Toronto in round 1. And I think with the injuries for the Panthers, I think it's really for them. Just get right.
Yep.
Get healthy. Yes, home ice means more to the Leafs, but that I still at least want that home ice for at least round 1. But the Panthers can go into Toronto and win a series for them. So I kind of accepted that, with the injuries that it's going to be a tougher hill to climb, and they don't own the tiebreakers over neither of them at this point in time. So that's what's going to be a little tough for the Panthers here, and to sweep these next 3 games against Toronto and Tampa Bay. That's a lot to ask for. I will say that.
Yeah.
So
it is, but if they pull that off,
I'd be over the moon.
It's their spot to lose, right? Like they've put themselves in a position where it's okay. You control your own destiny to get that spot. So I mean, look, this is the time of the year for it, right? I mean, to your point, not only does Tampa have a nicer schedule heading into the end of the season, but I mean, Nikita Kucherov has had back-to-back 4-point games. He's locked in. That's a guy that Montreal fans, Florida fans alike cannot stand that man. And for good reason. He's just an incredible hockey player. And also he plays a very good villain. It's just what he's good at.
Especially with his responses to the media.
Yeah, I know. That was the whole thing after the cup was very, it still sticks in our craw. Everyone's like, oh, why couldn't you just laugh at it? It's because our team just lost in the Stanley Cup final. Would you be laughing? I don't think so. Anyway. No. And look, I think the thing that I'm rooting for the most, and I know I think it would be best for hockey as a whole for Toronto to win that division, because then we would get Toronto, Ottawa in round 1, which would be incredible. We'd get Battle of Florida as well. Just the matchups would be so good. I would really it's good for the soul at that point to get those. And look, I mean, Montreal is not going to have enough gas to catch Ottawa this year. They're really fighting for that last wild card spot. It's really down to them. Both New York teams, the Rangers, the Islanders have slid a little bit, but they're still in that fight, as is Columbus. Detroit won't go away, though they're still pretty far out. And Detroit has the hardest remaining schedule. So it's really difficult to see them getting back in it. But if they did, you will know that they have earned it, that they've played a gauntlet of games. Montreal's got Florida Tuesday, and then they've got a bunch of games they need to win. They've got Boston. They have Philly again. They have Nashville. They have those are teams they need to beat if they want to be in this race. It seems like none of these teams want to be in this race. It's very much shades of last year, where it was Philly and it was Washington, it was Detroit, who were just, no, you take it. No, you take it. Like none of them wanted to take that last spot and get in just to get their teeth kicked in by the Rangers, which is ultimately what happened to Washington. It's going to be interesting to see the Canadiens team that we see the rest of the way, because I think Canadiens fans have argued that they look tired, and I wouldn't say that. I think they look overwhelmed by the moment. They recognize the size of the task that's in front of them, and even though they were in the driver's seat, they controlled their own destiny for some time. Now less so, but they just sort of it looked like they knew what was in front of them, and it scared them, which is fine. Like they're a young team; they shouldn't even be here, quite frankly. Yeah. So it's nice that they are here, but yeah, it's going to be a fight towards the end here. I know in our show notes that you sent over before, you had a bold prediction. You wanted to do some bold predictions. Did you have anything cooking in that respect?
Before I do, I'm looking at the strength of schedule for the wild card teams. For Habs, 5th easiest, 38.6 8.6% money puck gives them to make it. New York Rangers, second hardest. Columbus, seventh hardest. Detroit, hardest. The lack of head-to-heads might hurt for the Habs here when it comes to what could possibly happen. But again, they're still very much in control, right? They are in the spot as of right now. Obviously, it's a big game on Tuesday night for them against the Florida Panthers to at least, for them to at least gain some confidence in themselves, especially going into another matchup against the Stanley Cup champions. But during the summer, I had a crossover with Laura Saba, your co-host, and she was very shocked when I laid this prediction because she didn't have any expectations. A lot of people didn't about the Montreal Canadiens going into this season. I said that they were not going to finish last in the division because Patrick Laine raised their floor that much. Yeah, there was injuries for him in the beginning of the season. Yeah, at the beginning of his when he was first coming back into the lineup, it was mostly power play goals, which I believe he has 15 now.
It's still mostly power play goals. Let's be quite honest about what Patrick Laine is bringing, and it's awesome, but it is mostly power play.
But this is a little stage to help the kids grow into that next stage right before they're ready to pay the other guys. So I said that they were not going to finish last. I was right with saying that Buffalo was going to finish last again. But here's my prediction. I think with the strength of schedule, it favors the Canadiens, and I think they're going to find a way to get in. I think they will be that team, but the tiebreakers don't favor them, so they got to win outright, which is the tough part. I think it's going to come down to game 82 for them to get in.
Man, and that's a game against Carolina, who at that point, I mean, right now Carolina doesn't have much to play for. They're pretty much locked into that second overall in their division. They can't beat the Caps, and they're not going to fall far enough to lose to New Jersey. So they're kind of stuck there. So maybe they have nothing to play for. They rest a bunch of guys, and Montreal can walk into the playoffs. But I think you're right. I think it comes down to that last game, and you're right. They have to beat the Rangers outright. They cannot tie them in points because they will not catch them in the regulation wins tiebreaker. My bold prediction is maybe less bold, but I'll pick a Stanley Cup winner. I think the Panthers have what it takes to go back to back. I really do. I think that, as time goes on, we start to see that these teams that have just built, the types of rosters that get it done in the playoffs, they don't forget how to get it done. I think we see, what is this, the 7th straight year that a team from Florida is in the final or something like that. It's bonkers. It should not be this way, but it is. They're just currently both really elite teams. Is it 5?
5 currently.
Yeah. So they're built so well. I'm so jealous of the roster that they've been able to construct. And they've done it the right way, really, through draft, through trade. They haven't, and then they still find guys like Mackie Samoskevich, who's every time I watch him, I go, that's a kind of player that makes a great team, an elite team, because you just find this guy and you turn him into a guy who can chip in. I don't know, maybe he's a 30 goal scorer one day. That doesn't seem that far off for him. I think Florida goes back to back. They end up raising the cup at the end of the year.
I'm hoping so, and that's why for Mackie Samoskevich, I'm hoping that he gets a long-term deal at early on, right before the cap goes up. And for the Panthers, this was the time last season where they were starting to take a little bit of a dip, and then once April came around, that's when they started coming back up and getting ready for the playoffs. And so hopefully this is the same thing for the Panthers here.
Awesome. Well, I think that's going to do it for us today on this one. Armando, where can people find you in the rest of your work?
They can follow me on X and Bluesky at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers, and on Bluesky at LOFLA Panthers, and Locked On Florida Panthers podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. How about yourself, Ian?
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, maybe it's Ian most platforms, Bluesky mostly. You can follow Laura at The Active Stick, the show at Locked On Canadiens, LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com if you'd like to send us an email. Thank you for listening to Locked On Canadiens and Locked On Panthers for your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also available now on Amazon Fire TV on your free Fire TV channels app. Click the Montreal Canadiens or Florida Panthers logo in the hockey section, and you can watch all of our episodes there as well. Thanks so much for listening today, and we will see you tomorrow back on our respective programs. Take it easy. We'll see you then.